Welcome back to Waking Mad. These are your hosts, RJO and Ben Bruce.
This is part two.
This is part two. Waking Mad, where we courageously explore human existence. And I like to say that everything disclosed here is open to the question.
Yeah, absolutely. Living in the question, just to start off with this point, is an extraordinarily essential part of living philosophically with regard to the consciousness project. Once you start to say that you know something and you stop questioning it, you'll never understand it.
You stop exploring it when you stop questioning it. You stop
Exactly.
downloading intuitive content and ideas. It completely defies the creative process.
Absolutely. And these are the words of Einstein, and many others have stated the same thing. If you're a theorist, a theoretician, a philosopher, then living in the question is the way to go. And there's even a name or a term for this process. It's the eroteme or erotime, which is the question mark. The symbol of the question mark is the eroteme. And as you can see, the stem of that word erotic from the Greek god or principle eros is really the beginning of life. It's through coupling up and being in love and expressing our love, sexually even, that we actually procreate life. So the question mark is pretty sexy.
Yeah, well said. Yeah, well.
So yes, we've introduced Robert Bruce already in part one, and we have so much to talk about. We've needed to split up these podcasts into several parts, and now this is part two. And we were talking about the mind split effect in part one.
Yep.
And now it would be really good to explore some of the ramifications of understanding out-of-body experience, and exactly what it is actually, on understanding the wider nature of consciousness.
That's right. And how do you come from having experiences and then making sense of it and not passing it off as it's some conspiracy or
I'm schizophrenic,
or I'm going mad, or
it's just a dream.
All of those things come up because if you're a child in a house, and children have a lot of astral projection and clairvoyant experiences, if you're in a household that doesn't believe in that sort of thing or thinks it's evil, if the child mentioned that, is honest with his parent and says, oh, this and that's happening, it's like, oh my God, call the priest, or
the shrink,
or it's not happening. And if a child is experiencing something which is very real to them, and you try and browbeat them as a parent that it's not happening, you're causing a schism, a psychological issue to appear in that child, and you're creating it.
I remember I was talking to my wife about this, Kim, and she was talking about her phenomenal experience as a little girl, and I believe it was encountering beings like, basically what we would call fairies, and interacting with spirits and seeing orbs, I think was the way she put it, sort of floating lights. And her mother, who had some understanding of what these things were, I gathered because she'd experienced some of it, or at least knew that her child was a spirited child, so to speak, said, look, that's lovely, I'm happy to talk to you, Kim, but you might want to be careful about talking to other kids or teachers at school about this. And it's because, we need to protect our kids, don't we, from, mockery and next thing you know, you're getting electroconvulsive therapy in such an era, I would suggest.
Yeah, but you're not pressuring the child to say, no, it didn't happen, I'm making this up.
The way you really interact with children or anyone about these phenomenal experiences needs to be done with kid gloves, doesn't it? You need to be respectful, but also prepare them for the real world, because the real corporeal consensus paradigm world, let's call it, doesn't really take into account these older states of consciousness as being much chop at all. Well, they're all, sort of relegated to the domain of sleep or fantasy or something like that.
Yeah, well, and it's not really open to the question, is it? I mean, it's very closed thinking.
Closed system.
Yeah, it's a very closed system.
And that's your positivistic reductionism. It's all,
that's right.
What's the point?
Prove it.
It doesn't matter. You can't get anything out of this. You can't prove it.
But I would say, well, prove that it doesn't exist. And I think that is a better question to have, a better mentality.
These are phenomenal experiences, okay? The word phenomena intrinsically means this is something we don't really understand or completely understand. When you open up further, everything's phenomena.
Everything.
A tree giving off gases is a phenomena. It's doing something, and we think we understand its entirety, but do we? I mean, just recently I remember finding out that, you know, it was only in recent medical endocrinological history that we realised that fat cells can create hormones. I think it's lectin, which is something to do with fat metabolism and so on and so forth. And before that, it was the understanding or the belief or the truth, as doctors were putting it out there, that only endocrine glands and so on secrete hormones, and that fat cells didn't. But now we know they do. So scientific theory is changing all the time.
So Robert, how did you go from this environment in this society where it's quite closed-minded to developing this experience and these methods and these paradigms to make sense of it? How did you go about doing that?
From the experience upward, yeah.
Experience upwards, yeah.
Well, to start with, the people I chose to spend my time with, I've always been very honest about what I am, what I believe, who I am, and about astral projection, clairvoyance, all my spiritual beliefs, you could call them. And if you couldn't accept that, then we would socialise. So I grew up being able to speak my mind. That's something I've always demanded as a prerequisite to have anything more than a light friendship with. You've got to be able to talk about these sort of things, or at least tolerate me talking about them.
I gather your way of understanding the phenomena of out-of-body experience, for example, and other sorts of, let's call it, altered states of consciousness or spiritual encounters, I gather your understanding of that changed as you progressed, though.
It changed through use. After thousands of astral projections and thousands of clairvoyant and clairaudient experiences through my life, and as I became an adult and started exploring these things more fully, I had a lot of major experiences, including fully raising my Kundalini many times. So that did it. And then several months after that, I became possessed by a spirit entity, a very nasty one. It almost killed me. But after all of that, I still didn't understand how things fitted together and what was happening around me. And it was a couple of years after I survived that, and under my own steam, I might add, which I've never heard of happening before. I mean, nobody survives spirit, possession at that level, but I did. And it's through my discoveries which led me to write the book, The Practical Psychic Self-Defense Handbook, which is in there. It survived me, but after all of that, I'm trying to put it again, I'm trying to go further, I'm trying to explore, and everywhere I went, I'm banging my head against walls. I couldn't go any further. And then one evening, at about 9 p.m, I always used to meditate, and those days my wife and children would go to bed at 8 very early, and I would have the front room to myself to meditate in and astral project all night sometimes. And one night I walked into that room, which had a nice little fire going, in a tile fire, and I walked in, I was still standing, I reached up to turn the overhead light out. Then before I touched the switch, a voice spoke to me, a physical voice, which I could have recorded. And it said, "Robert, it's about time we had a long talk." And this was the most beautiful male voice I've ever heard. And it was deep, rich, eloquent, sophisticated and loving. And as it was talking to me, the mastoid bone behind my ear, the curved bone behind my ear, was vibrating, modulating with the voice. And my carotid gland, cuttoid gland under here, the one that swells up when you get sick, was also vibrating, modulating with the voice. It's like I put my fingernail in it and feel the bone vibrating. And it's like putting your fingertip onto the middle of a large speaker. You can feel the vibrations modulating if a voice is speaking.
So just to come in there, what I'm hearing is that when you're having these phenomenal experiences, and now you're going into other phenomenal experiences involving other beings
and
so
corporeal, affecting the corporeal senses.
Yeah, the interaction.
The interaction.
It sounds like what you're doing essentially is you're observing it all the time. You're taking notes, you're observing it
constantly.
So it's kind of an empirical method that you're using.
There is an aspect of me which is the observer inside of me, which is constantly observing me every waking moment. And that's the aspect of me which is also the writer and also the speaker and that. And there's another aspect of me, sounds a bit schizophrenic, but the other aspect of me which is husband, father, son, brother, sister, you know, which have there's different aspects of me. But because of the observer in me, I'm very, very noticeable of these different aspects of me talking forward. Like if my sister comes into the room now, and I could feel this aspect stepping forward, brother steps forward, and now I'm brother. You know, and my son walks into the room, father comes out.
Well, this is a really interesting way of understanding consciousness or existence, is that we're actually a sum of many parts.
Yeah.
We're not a unitary construct at all. The idea of saying, oh, this is me, or I am who I am, or even identifying myself by my abstract label called a name, it's obviously not really true. It's a bit of an illusion. We're a consortium of parts.
Maybe a good analogy is a bit like having a wardrobe full of clothes, and how I have many different clothes suited for different environments, and I have certain ones that I like, certain ones that I wear most of the time. It could be like something grungy. I too, likewise, have different personalities or...
Yeah, definitely. But to continue on there, to encapsulate this, what happens, the voice, the master, master, which is a tangible presence. I'm hearing this physical voice, which if I had the right microphone, I could have physically recorded.
So it's very important. It was not an internal monologue,
no,
as in a thought or a strong thought sequence. It was actually experienced as an external voice.
It's like direct voice.
Auditory. Yeah.
Now I sat, and it told me to sit down, and it continued talking to me and giving instruction for like an hour. Now, when you interact with higher beings, angels, I've met a bunch of angels in my life, and masters, you can't have a conversation with them, you can't ask a question, there's no need to ask a question. They already have the prescience, they know exactly what you need to hear, and they will give you instruction or advice.
It's telepathic?
It can be telepathic. There's various ways they can manifest through.
Or there's the term clairsentient. Yeah, they're aware of what you're...
Using your psychic abilities, or they can actually, you know, these level beings can actually physically materialize as a physical human being.
So we're talking about an advanced level of consciousness that already knows your limitations and or strengths with regard to understanding a subject, such that they already know exactly how to phrase something.
Yeah, how to deliver it.
How to deliver it.
So that you would understand.
And it might be a gesture. Is it symbolic gesture as well as multimodal kind of language?
Particularly with angels, when you encounter angels there, every little action, every gesture, every expression, every word is communication to you, and it's very, very symbolic. And I've found with I've had encounters with angels and that. Masters tend to speak more. They're more direct, but it's very much to the point. Now, through this conversation, the master spoke and gave instruction for like an hour, everything I needed to hear, and the crux of this was, he said to me, he said, the reason you can't go any further in your exploration of the greater reality is because you are blinding yourself and stopping yourself at every turn. He said, your own beliefs are doing this. And he explained to me the nature of beliefs, and he explained to me what I call the catch basket concept, which is basically the creative process. And this is how all creative writers and mathematicians and scientists and artists work through this process for this higher level communication. But the importance of belief there, what the master did, he explained to me the need to use scientific method on spirituality, where you have to analyse your belief system and the things that you believe. And a very simple way of doing this, he said, is first he had me write down the next day all the things that I believed in. And there's page after page of this stuff. And there's Bigfoots in there, and UFOs, and Atlantis, and all that. And then he said,
what do you call it, the smorgasbord belief system?
Yeah.
Have a little bit of this, a little bit of that, not too much of this.
That's like every other person in, you could say, the spiritual world. You know, I had forged my beliefs through what resonated with me. It's like, oh, that resonates with me, so I choose to believe.
Or even would you suggest, oh, I'd like to believe in that. That sounds comforting to me.
How would you do, if you were a research chemist or a research physicist, how would that approach affect the field of physics and chemistry? It would completely destroy it.
We'd be straight back to alchemy, straight back to...
Yeah, because, oh, I choose to believe that this process works. You've just got to put enough love into the chemistry vials and the reaction will occur. And if you can't see it, maybe it's happening on another level.
Yeah.
There's always ways to talk you out.
If I could just come in here for a minute, one of the remarkable features of not only this conversation, but you as a practitioner and as a theorist, is that you're able to bridge the gap and traverse the labyrinth, if you will, or the chasm between scientific inquiry, which is simply it's about observation, and it's about acknowledging the difference between a thought, a hypothesis, or a theory, a belief, and a fact.
Yep.
You know, and you can explore metaphysics, you can explore the greater nature of reality, older states of consciousness, which bring us into the spiritual realm, for want of a better term. In other words, this massive hole between paradigms, and you're able to connect science with spirituality.
Mm-hmm. Because otherwise you could come up with all sorts of conjecture.
Scientific method.
You could come up with all sorts of conjecture based on one phenomenon, right?
Which is what we have today. This is how the New Age spiritual state of affairs today. There's like hundreds of different fields and areas around there. There's no cohesion. There's no. You don't have any physics. No laws of physics. Nothing. No yardsticks to measure things by. And this is what it comes down to. And the master explained to me. He says, make up a list of all the things that you believe in that you have actually experienced personally yourself. And he said, if you've only experienced something once, you've got to put an asterisk next to that to show that it's a one-off. Now, I ended up with a list of 9 things. And that was angels and demons are real. I've met a few. You know, astral projection is real. Healing and energy work is real. It's a very, very short list. But this formed the foundation of my core beliefs in my heart. This is analogy here. It's not, they don't actually exist there. This forms my core beliefs. Then I have 2 other lists, and the first one is over here. There's probabilities. All the things that I think, based upon this and my life experience, are probably true. But I don't have personal experience enough to take it into my core beliefs.
I remember.
And the last list, sorry, to go on here, is the possibilities list, which sits over here. Things I think are possible, but I don't have enough experience to take it into the probable list or my core beliefs. And if you do this, you change the structure of your interface with your higher self, and you free up the gates of creativity and intuition and communicating with the collective consciousness.
Because if I was to use an analogy here, it would be like driving on a road and going from A to B. But if you pulled over every 2 minutes, 30 seconds, as in if you got distracted via concepts, ideas, beliefs, drama, attachment to materials, right? In what we're saying, conjecture. If you get distracted, how are you going to get anywhere? How are you able to drive from A to B?
You can't get.
You just can't.
You can't make progress.
Well,
you can't make progress.
This is why Ben would know more about this than me. Why scientific method came into being and was composed, and this with strict criteria.
That's the Enlightenment.
Yeah, this is how scientific method came into being, where you observe a phenomena and you repeat it yourself, and then the peer review, you get other people to try and reproduce your experiment with the same results, and then through the peer review and empirical processes and that, it becomes a fact or a law of physics or of chemistry.
If I could just come in there as a bit of a summary point, nutshell, you know, with the Enlightenment, we had, you know, the church, just prior to the Enlightenment, the church, the Christian church in the Western world at least, was basically in control of all things in terms of the prescribed belief system for the nature of reality and consciousness, therefore.
And science was at a standstill.
Absolutely, you couldn't progress. And enlightened thinkers, which is a whole bunch of different people. There was obviously a revolution of consciousness going on. People had a gutful, and I think many people could see how much the human race was being collectively held back by this prescribed belief system. And it's talked about in terms of canons, the canons of the church, and so on. And you know, you had people like Rene Descartes and Hobbes and Kant,
Galileo,
absolutely Galileo, and these sorts of theorists and many others. Who, you know, in all different countries around the world, mostly the Western world in this case, started to question it. You know, and some of them were persecuted. I mean, Galileo was definitely persecuted.
The flat earth theory comes in there. He was excommunicated, Galileo.
And you know, and we see this whole revolution of what we call enlightened thinking coming from this, where people started to ask questions, and asking questions is the essence of the enlightenment and being enlightened.
It's happened time and time again, as you pointed out. We have a consensus about the way things are, and then you have a very small minority that question the consensus.
We're normally persecuted.
Or challenge the consensus, who are normally persecuted,
or ridiculed,
kept down, ridiculed, suppressed, and then eventually,
or burned at the stake.
Because the revelation there, the challenge or the question is truth. Because it is the light in the dark, that it builds up, it spreads like a good virus.
The truth is a powerful shield. You can't stop it.
That's right. Because
you can't completely stop it. You
right.
may be able to suppress it for a while, but it will bubble back out again.
Exactly. So what happens is you get this consensus, and this minority grows until you have a critical mass.
A counterlever.
A counterlever where the consensus paradigm shatters, and the new one takes its place.
Yeah.
And then
revolution.
You have a revolution. But then, like it happens, something else gets suppressed, and we have a revolution upon revolution upon revolution.
And this is about the nature of power. This is about the nature of politics.
Yes.
People in positions of power benefit from status quo, and that's why they want to keep it the way it is. I mean, if I'm the Pope of Rome or the local Archbishop, and I'm getting all of the tithes from people and property taxes, and everyone has to go to church lest they lose their immortal soul.
Massive control,
massive power, massive wealth. Why on earth would I want to give that up? And if I'm attached to my belief system, personally attached to my religion, that I think that this is the way it is, I'm obviously going to feel threatened if people are questioning that. So that's another reason as well. People feel very insecure if they've got a belief system that they're dependent on, gets questioned. And this is why I like to say, I don't really like to believe in anything. I mean, I would go one step further than what you just said before with your catch basket concept. I would actually say I would dispute the need for belief at all. I'm very happy to have a thought. I'm very happy to have a feeling or an opinion or a hypothesis or a theory. I'm not really happy having a belief.
Even a technique.
Technique and method.
Methods.
These are much better verbs, right?
Because the word has been misused for so long, but it is what it is.
Similar connotations with the word God.
You're not going to get away from the use of belief. You believe something, but to believe something through practical experience.
Well, believe it or not, I've actually tried to stop using the term belief.
It's in our language. It's
because I like to actually think and be mindful. To mindful philosophy, if you will, to this belief, because I don't want to be deluding myself.
Well, I also don't want to be perpetuating this consensus and then revolution upon revolution. What better way to move forward than to adopt a perspective that embraces the question and stops the cycle repeating over and over and over.
So just returning to Robert's revolution, because I'd suggest that you've gone through different cycles. I mean, you must have had a major revolution in your worldview after that encounter with that voice, that master.
It was so logical, made so much sense. It answered all my questions. And the way he described it, he said, your current belief system forms, he said, this is an analogy, a triangle in your mind. And imagine you have a triangle over your mind here like that. And this is a perceptual belief system filter. So everything that your communications with the collective consciousness of the universe has to pass through that belief system filter. Those rose-coloured glasses makes everything rosy for you. Now, just imagine that all truth is spherical, orbs of truth. Now, if you're trying to download an idea or a technique, anything from the collective consciousness, all these little balls of truth coming down, being forced through your triangle and destroyed. You put a soap bubble for a triangle, you're going to pop it. And only the little ones, you might get a few little ones come through, get a few ideas.
Or even
but
better,
you're not going to get the big ones.
Or even better, if you put a circle or sphere through a triangle, the sphere becomes a triangle. So, if you have a belief, if you have this, you attach this belief that is a square, and if you try to shove an idea, like you forcibly relate
Or
to
an
this
experience
idea
of
or
phenomena.
experience a
You
phenomena, and you
transform
think
it
that
or
it's a
destroy it.
square,
Yeah.
it will become a square.
So really, the nature of belief is that it's a filter.
It's a filter.
Well, the process.
Perceptual filters, belief system filters, paradigmatic filters. They affect the nature of reality.
Well,
They affect the nature of your experiences. They get conditioned by them.
And they affect the nature of the communications between you, your higher self, God, source, the collective consciousness, whatever you want. And the idea with disciplining which is very simple to do, but it's a lifetime's work, what I call the catch basket concept, to hone your beliefs so they're all based upon truth and personal experience, all personal experience. You make your belief system filter round, and that way orbs of truth can smoothly pass through like a funnel into your mind, and this is what we've done. And this is why, if you have your belief systems in order there, you are, of course, by nature open to anything.
I mean, I would suggest questioning beliefs at all times as a discipline. I mean, you brush your teeth every day.
That's scientific method.
Similarly, question your beliefs every day. How do I know this for sure? This is the essence of cognitive therapy, which is one of the major ways of helping people with psychological disorders used by psychologists.
Questioning the
Question.
thoughts.
How do you know this for sure? I mean, if I'm a depressive, I'm going to say, oh, everything's shit. What's the point? No one cares. I'm not good enough. I'm never going to amount to anything. How do I know for sure? The answer is I don't. Now, all of a sudden, I have a point of departure for healing and wellness, because I'm actually distorting the nature of reality via my worldview, via my distorted way of thinking. So we see a huge part of depression, for example, not all of it, but some of it based on distorted reasoning and the belief system.
And on that note,
Question the beliefs.
Question your beliefs. Stay in the question.
How could you be truly free? I mean, the truth will set you free, and that means distorted, biased beliefs need to be questioned.
Yep. And we're going to be
continuing
this in the next
part 3.
In part 3, that's right. So, thank you very much.
We'll see you in part 3.
See you in part 3.